All right, so we're back at the Caribou Public Library. I'm Miss Erin, and we're reading Black Beauty for our chapter book story time. Black Beauty is written by Anna Sewell, and we are on chapter 23. It is called A Strike for Liberty. One day, my lady came down later than usual, and the silk rustled more than ever. "Drive to the Duchess of B's," she said, and then after a pause, "Are you never going to get those horses' heads up, York? Raise them at once, and let us have no more of this humoring and nonsense." York came to me first, while the groom stood at Ginger's head. He drew my head back and fixed the rein so tight that it was almost intolerable. Then he went to Ginger, who was impatiently jerking her head up and down against the bit, as was her way now. She had a good idea of what was coming, and the moment York took the rein off the terret in order to shorten it, she took her opportunity and reared up so suddenly that York had his nose roughly hit and his hat knocked off. The groom was nearly thrown off his legs. At once they both flew to her head, but she was a match for them and went on plunging, rearing, and kicking in a most desperate manner. At last she kicked right over the carriage pole and fell down, after giving me a severe blow on my near quarter. There is no knowing what further mischief she might have done, had not York promptly sat himself down flat on her head to prevent her struggling, at the same time calling out, "Unbuckle the black horse. Run for the winch and unscrew the carriage pole. Cut the trace here, somebody, if you can unhitch it." One of the footmen ran for the winch, and another brought a knife from the house. The groom soon set me free from Ginger and the carriage, and led me to my box. He just turned me in as I was, and ran back to York. I was very much excited by what had happened, and if I had ever been used to kick or rear, I'm sure I should have done it then. But I never did, and there I stood, angry, sore in my legs, and my head still strained up to the terret on the saddle, and no power to get it down. I was very miserable, and felt much inclined to kick the first person who came near me. Before long, however, Ginger was led in by two grooms. A good deal knocked about and bruised. York came with her and gave his orders, and then came to look at me. In a moment he let down my head. "Confound these bearing reins," he said to himself. "I thought we should have some mischief soon. Master will be sorely vexed. But there, if a woman's husband can't rule her, of course a servant can't. So I wash my hands of it. If she can't get to the Duchess's garden party, I can't help it." York did not say this before the men. He always spoke respectfully if they were nearby. Now he felt me all over, and he soon found the place above my hock where I had been kicked. It was swelled and painful, and he ordered it to be sponged with hot water, and then some lotion was put on. Lord W. was much put out when he learned what had happened. He blamed York for giving way to his mistress, to which he replied that in future he would much prefer to receive his orders only from his lordship. But I think nothing came of it, for things went on the same as before. I thought York might have stood up better for his horses, but perhaps I am no judge. Ginger was never put into the carriage again, but when she was well of her bruises, one of Lord W.'s younger sons said that he should like to have her. He was sure that she would make a good hunter. As for me, I was obliged still to go in the carriage, and had a fresh partner called Max. He had always been used to the tight rein. I asked him how it was that he bore it. "Well," he said, "I bear it because I must, but it is shortening my life, and it will shorten yours too, if you have to stick to it." "Do you think," I said, "that our masters know how bad it is for us?" "I can't say," he replied, "but the dealers and the horse doctors know it very well. I was at the dealer's once, who was training me and another horse to go as a pair. He was getting our heads up, and he said, a little higher and a little higher every day. A gentleman who was there asked him why he did so. 'Because,' he said, 'people won't buy them unless we do. The London people always want their horses to carry their heads high and to step high. Of course, it is very bad for the horses, but then it is good for trade. The horses soon wear up or get diseased, and they come for another pair.' That," said Max, "is what he said in my hearing, and you can judge for yourself. What I suffered with that rein for 4 long months in my lady's carriage, it would be hard to describe. But I am quite sure that, had it lasted much longer, either my health or my temper would have given way. Before that, I never knew what it was to foam at the mouth, but now the action of the sharp bit on my tongue and jaw, and the constrained position of my head and throat, always caused me to froth at the mouth more or less. Some people think it very fine to see this and say, "What a fine-spirited creature." But it is just as unnatural for horses as for men to foam at the mouth. It is a sure sign of some discomfort, and should be attended to. Besides this, there was a pressure on my windpipe, which often made my breathing very uncomfortable. When I returned from my work, my neck and chest were strained and painful, my mouth and tongue tender, and I felt worn and depressed. In my old home, I always knew that John and my master were my friends. But here, although in many ways I was well treated, I had no friend. York might have known, and very likely did know, how that rain harassed me, but I suppose he took it as a matter of course that could not be helped. At any rate, nothing was done to relieve me. The next chapter is called Lady Anne or a Runaway Horse for chapter 24. Let me show you our picture. Early in the spring, Lord W. and part of his family went up to London and took York with them. I and Ginger had some other horses were left at home for use, and the head groom was left in charge. The Lady Harriet, who remained at the hall, was a great invalid and never went out in the carriage, and the Lady Anne preferred riding on horseback with her brother or cousins. She was a perfect horsewoman, and as gay and gentle as she was beautiful. She chose me for her horse and named me Black Auster. I enjoyed these rides very much in the clear, cold air, sometimes with Ginger, sometimes with Lizzie. This Lizzie was a bright bay mare, almost thoroughbred, and a great favorite with the gentlemen, on account of her fine action and lively spirit. But Ginger, who knew more of her than I did, told me that she was rather nervous. There was a gentleman of the name of Blantyre staying at the hall, and he always rode Lizzie, and praised her so much that one day Lady Anne ordered the side saddle be put on her, and the other saddle on me. When we came to the door, the gentleman seemed very uneasy. "How is this?" he said. "Are you tired of your good Black Auster?" "Oh, no, not at all," she replied, "but I am amiable enough to let you ride him for once, and I will try your charming Lizzie. You must confess that in size and appearance she is far more like a lady's horse than my own favorite." Do let me advise you not to mount her," he said. "She is a charming creature, but she is too nervous for a lady. I assure you she is not perfectly safe. Let me beg you to have the saddles changed." "My dear cousin," said Lady Anne, laughing, "pray do not trouble your good, careful head about me. I've been a horsewoman ever since I was a baby, and I have followed the hounds a great many times, though I know that you do not approve of ladies hunting. But still, that is a fact, and I intend to try this Lizzie that you gentlemen are all so fond of, so please help me to mount like a good friend as you are." There was no more to be said. He placed her carefully on the saddle, looked to the bit and curb, gave the reins gently into her hand, and then mounted me. Just as we were moving off, a footman came out with a slip of paper and message from the Lady Harriet. Would they ask this question for her at Dr. Ashley's and bring the answer? The village was about a mile off, and the doctor's house was the last in it. We went away gaily enough till we came to his gate. There was a short drive up to the house between tall evergreens. Blantyre alighted at the gate and was going to open it for Lady Anne, but she said, "I will wait for you here, and you can hang Auster's rein on the gate." He looked at her doubtfully. "I will not be 5 minutes," he said. "Oh, do not hurry yourself. Lizzie and I shall not run away from you." He hung my rein on one of the iron spikes, and was soon hidden among the trees. Lizzie was standing by quietly by the side of the road a few paces off with her back to me. My young mistress was sitting easily with a loose rein, humming a little song. I listened to my rider's footsteps until they reached the house, and heard him knock at the door. There was a meadow on the opposite side of the road, the gate of which stood open. Just then some cart horses and several young colts came trotting out in a very disorderly manner, while a boy behind was cracking a great whip. The colts were wild and frolicsome, and one of them bolted across the road and blundered up against Lizzie's hind legs. And whether it was the stupid colt or the loud cracking of the whip, or both together, I cannot say, but she gave a violent kick and dashed off into a headlong gallop. It was so sudden that Lady Anne was nearly unseated, but she soon recovered herself. I gave a loud, shrill neigh for help. Again and again I neighed, pawing the ground impatiently and tossing my head to get the rein loose. I had not long to wait. Blantyre came running to the gate. He looked anxiously about, and just caught sight of the flying figure, now far away on the road. In an instant, he sprang to the saddle. I needed no whip or spur, for I was as eager as my rider. He saw it, and giving me a free rein, and leaning a little forward, we dashed after them. For about 1.5 miles, the road ran straight, and then bent to the right, after which it dived into 2 roads. Long before we came to the bend, she was out of sight. Which way had she turned? A woman was standing at her garden gate, shading her eyes with her hand, and looking eagerly up the road. Scarcely drawing the rein, Blantyre shouted, "Which way?" "To the right," cried the woman, pointing with her hand, and away we went up the right-hand road. Then, for a moment, we caught sight of her. Another bend, and she was hidden again. Several times we caught glimpses and then lost them. We scarcely seemed to gain ground upon them at all. An old road mender was standing near a heap of stones. His shovel dropped and his hand raised. As we came near, he made a sign to speak. Blantyre drew rein a little. To the common, sir. She has turned off there." I knew this common very well. It was for the most part very uneven ground, covered with heather and dark green furze bushes, with here and there a scrubby old thorn tree. There was also open spaces of fine short grass, with anthills and mole turns everywhere, the worst place I ever knew for a headlong gallop. We had hardly turned on the common when we caught sight again of the green habit flying on before us. My lady's hat was gone, and her long brown hair was streaming behind her. Here's a picture. Look, she is caught on this horse that is just out of control. And then there's Blantyre following on Black Beauty. We had hardly turned on the common when we caught sight. Oh, I already read that. Her head and body were thrown back as if she were pulling with all her remaining strength, and as if that strength were nearly exhausted. It was clear that the roughness of the ground had very much lessened Lizzie's speed, and there seemed a chance that we might overtake her. While we were on the high road, Blantyre had given me my head, but now, with a light hand and a practiced eye, he guided me over the ground in such a masterly manner that my pace was scarcely slackened, and we were decidedly gaining on them. About halfway across the heath, there had been a wide dike recently cut, and the earth from the cutting was cast up roughly on the other side. Surely this would stop them. But no, with scarcely a pause, Lizzie took the leap, stumbled among the rough clods, and fell. Blantyre groaned. "Now, Auster, do your best." He gave me a steady rein. I gathered myself well together, and with one determined leap cleared both dike and bank. Motionless among the heather, with her face to the earth, lay my poor young mistress. Blantyre kneeled down and called her name. There was no sound. Gently, he turned her face upward. It was ghastly white, and the eyes were closed. "Annie, dear Annie, do speak." But there was no answer. He unbuttoned her habit, loosened her collar, felt her hands and wrists, and then started up and looked wildly round him for help. At no great distance there were 2 men cutting turf, who, seeing Lizzie running wild without a rider, had left their work to catch her. Blantyre's halloo soon brought them to the spot. The foremost man seemed much troubled at the sight, and asked what he could do. "Can you ride?" "Well, sir, I bean't much of a horseman, but I'd risk my neck for the Lady Anne. She was uncommon good to my wife in the winter." "Then mount this horse, my friend. Your neck will be quite safe. And ride to the doctor's and ask him to come instantly. Then on to the hall. Tell them all that you know, and bid them to send me a carriage with Lady Anne's maid and help. I shall stay here." "All right, sir, I'll do my best, and I pray God that the young lady may open her eyes soon." Then, seeing the other man, he called out, "Here, Joe, run for some water, and tell my missus to come as quick as she can to the Lady Anne." He then somehow scrambled into the saddle, and with a "Gee-up!" and a clap on my sides with both his legs, he started on his journey, making a little circuit to avoid the dike. He had no whip, which seemed to trouble him, but my pace soon cured that difficulty, and he found the best thing that he could do was to stick to the saddle and hold me in, which he did manfully. I shook him as little as I could help, but once or twice on the rough ground he called out, "Steady, whoa, steady!" On the high road we were all right, and at the doctor's and the hall he did his errand like a good man and true. They asked him in to take a drop of something. "Oh, no," he said, "I'll be back to 'em again by a short-cut through the fields, and be there before the carriage." There was a great deal of hurry and excitement after the news became known. I was just turned into my box, and saddle and the bridle were taken off, and a cloth was thrown over me. Ginger was saddled and sent off in great haste for Lord George, and I soon heard the carriage roll out of the yard. It seemed a long time before Ginger came back, and before we were left alone, and then she told me all that she had seen. "I can't tell much," she said. "We went on a gallop nearly all the way. We got there just as the doctor rode up. There was a woman sitting on the ground with the lady's head in her lap. The doctor poured something into her mouth, but all that I heard was, 'She's not dead.' Then I was led off by a man to a little distance. After a while she was taken to the carriage, and we came home together. I heard my master say to a gentleman who stopped him to inquire that he hoped no bones were broken, but that she had not spoken yet. When Lord George took Ginger for hunting, York shook his head. He said it ought to be a steady hand to train a horse for the first season, and not a random rider like Lord George. Ginger used to like it very much, but sometimes when she came back I could see that she had been very strained, and now and then she gave a short cough. She had too much spirit to complain, but I could not help feeling anxious about her. 2 days after the accident, Blantyre paid me a visit. He patted me and praised me very much. He told Lord George that he was sure the horse knew of Annie's danger as well as he did. I could not have held him in if I would, he said. She ought never to ride any other horse. I found by their conversation that my young mistress was now out of danger and would soon be able to ride again. This was good news to me, and I looked forward to a happy life. That's it for today, the end of chapter 24. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time. Until then.